Thank you so much. I'm Shannon Watts. I'm the founder of Moms Demand Action, and it is an honor to share the virtual stage with so many gun violence prevention advocates today. The trajectory of my life changed forever, nearly 8 years ago on December 14th, 2012. I had just dumped a pile of laundry onto my bed, and the news of the school shooting at Sandy Hook School in Newtown, Connecticut broke on my television. Every mom bone in my body ached. I am not a religious person, but for the first time in years, I prayed. I prayed that this wasn't as bad as it looked, that the horror was not as deep as it seemed. But then it was confirmed. 20 first graders and 6 educators were shot and killed that morning. My anger was visceral, and we, the adults, had failed to protect children in a place where they should be safe without question, their elementary school. At that time, I had 2 choices. I could move my family of 7 to another country with less gun violence, or I could stay and fight in this country that I loved. And I had no idea what that fight would look like, much less how to participate in it. But the day after the shooting in Newtown, from a laptop in my kitchen counter, I started a Facebook page that would organize other heartbroken mothers on the issue of gun safety. 8 years later, we are 6 million supporters strong with a chapter in every single state. And we aren't just moms anymore. We're non-moms, we're men, we're students. But like too many Americans, I was late to this fight. I joined the movement to reduce gun violence in 2012, but women of color had already been in the trenches for decades, fighting for the safety of their children and their communities. Before Sandy Hook, my worries for my own safety were relatively few, and concerns for my children really centered around whether they'd make friends at school or get good grades. In other words, I was living in a bubble. So many American parents, particularly parents of color, have never had the luxury of not worrying about gun violence. There's so much media attention when there's a mass shooting, but mass shootings are about 1% of the gun violence that happens every year in our country. Over 100 Americans are shot and killed every day, and hundreds more are wounded. For years, I've had the honor to work alongside survivors of gun violence every day, and I'm incredibly grateful to my friend and Texas Moms Demand Action volunteer, Calandrian Simpson Kemp, for joining us to share her experience as a gun violence survivor as we close out today's event. So Calandrian, it is wonderful to see you virtually. Can you tell us about your son, George, and about how you got involved in the gun violence prevention movement?
Yes, thank you, Shannon. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to speak to everyone today. I didn't think that I could do this in 2013. My beautiful 20-year-old son, George Kemp, was murdered. George, we poured everything into our son as an African-American family. We tried to ensure that George had the best. He come from 2 parents, a loving household, church, sports, you name it, we were there for everything involving George's life. George went on to college. He got a championship ring in football. He was an awesome kid. But most of all, George Kemp Jr. was my son. He was my baby boy. He was the one that was serious about his girlfriend. He was enrolled in diesel mechanic school because his dad told him that you can take care of somebody else's daughter. And George went on to do so. I think about my 20-year-old son that will never be able to kiss his mom's face when I turn old. He always said that he was going to kiss the little chocolate chips in my face when I got old. And I think about all of that is now gone because in 2013, my 20-year-old son was murdered. Young men had access to guns and my son's life was taken. I believe that if the guns had not been there among these young adults, that my son would still be here. This is my life now. Like I said, I had no idea. I just kept saying, where did the guns come from? Where did they come from? As an African-American mother, you talk to your children, you have that talk with your children about keeping them safe, but never in a million years that I ever had to think about talking to him about guns. I had no idea that they were so rampant in the community, especially the access among young adults.
Calandrian, we know that progress doesn't happen in a straight line. We often talk about how this work is a marathon and not a sprint. What have you found to be the most challenging about your work in the gun violence prevention movement? And how do you manage to stay focused and practice self-care?
The most challenge that I found when this happened to me was I didn't see anybody that looked like me. It seems like everybody that looked like me of color was hiding it or not letting people know that they were suffering. So I decided to do grassroots movements locally here in Houston and get out in the streets and was begging mothers to come out, bring the pictures of their children. This is the biggest one that I take of my son behind me. And just to let them come out and let their voices be heard. One of the biggest challenges I see that it seems like the tears of the Black mother is not taken seriously. It seems like only the tears when it happens to the white mothers that's when action takes place. But I'm here to tell you that is not the case. We've been doing this for years, as you mentioned, but now we're getting that platform to be able to say, we're here on the front lines. Our children matter. We have the right to use our voices in keeping our children safe as well. We love them too. At the end of the day, they're humans, just like anybody else's child. And in grounds of keeping self-care is my brain at times is trauma. I'm 7 years in this, and trauma is really hard for me to self-identify because I am not that same person like I used to be. If I am dropping things or not remembering things, it's all a part of what I've been going through. But the challenge is telling myself that everything from the local, state, and federal levels, there's so many different gun laws that are out, gun bills and things that are out there, is just trying to ensure that everybody that can use their center of influence is exercising those spaces to be able to change the gun laws to keep our children safe.
And Calandrian, as you've just detailed, you have given so much of yourself to the gun violence prevention movement. Can you tell us what you hope to see when it comes to gun violence prevention, and what message do you want to leave with the group of leaders gathered here today?
Yes, what I hope to see is lives being saved. What I hope to see is that everyone that is in the healthcare field use, again, their center of influence all the way down from the janitor, because the trauma is real, meaning the impact is so great in the volumes that this is happening over and over and over and over and over again. If the janitor is having to clean up, or the custodial person is having to clean up, all the way down to the x-ray tech, everybody's being affected by gun violence. And so I want to see that everybody take an action to get involved, whatever level that you can, and especially in minority communities, grassroots efforts, donating, putting those resources, supporting, and just using their voice to be able to even go to Advocacy Day to advocate for gun laws that would keep our children safe.
Well, thank you for that, Calandrian, and thank you so much for joining us today. I know your words and Georgia's story will inspire many people to get off the sidelines and to join us in this fight. Everyone has a place in the gun safety movement. I was a stay-at-home mom taking a break from a corporate communications career when I got started. We have volunteers who are gun owners and veterans and Democrats and Republicans, teachers, doctors, and more. And there's still so much work to be done as we continue in this fight. Advocates in the medical community and elected officials all need to work together to stop this public health crisis. So I encourage everyone who has joined us in today's discussion to find the organizations in your community that are on the ground doing the work to stop gun violence and offer them the support that they need to keep going. And thank you again to everyone for joining us for today's conversation.